Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's begin a journey you won't forget. When Margaret Hollins pushed open the bathroom door at Riverside Elementary School that Tuesday afternoon, she thought she'd seen everything in her 68 years of life. She was wrong. Sitting on the cold tile floor, trembling like a leaf in a storm, was 6-year-old Ellie Renford. The little girl's pale face was streaked with tears, her small hands clutching something against her chest. Margaret's heart stopped. It was a baby, a newborn baby, still fresh, still crying that fragile cry of new life. "Oh my goodness," Margaret whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The scene didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Ellie was just a child herself, a tiny first grader who'd only transferred to the school 2 weeks ago. She barely spoke to anyone, always sitting alone at lunch, always watching the world with those sad, ancient eyes that didn't belong in a child's face. "Ellie, sweetheart." Margaret knelt down slowly, her knees protesting. "Honey, what happened? Where did this baby come from?" Ellie's eyes were wide with fear, darting between Margaret and the bathroom door like a trapped bird. She pulled the baby closer, protective, desperate. "Please don't take him," the little girl whispered, her voice cracking. "Please. She said she'd come back. She promised she'd come back." Margaret's mind was racing. She could hear footsteps running down the hallway now. Someone had heard her gasp, heard the baby crying. Within seconds, the school secretary burst through the door, saw the scene, and called out. Everything happened fast after that. Too fast. Principal Pemberton arrived, her face drained of color. Teachers crowded the hallway, whispering, gasping, phones already in hand. Someone called 911. Margaret stayed on the floor with Ellie, trying to shield the child from the chaos exploding around them. "I've got you, sweetheart," Margaret murmured, though her own hands were shaking. "You're safe now, you're safe." But Ellie wasn't listening. She was rocking back and forth, humming a broken lullaby to the baby in her arms, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The sirens arrived within minutes. Paramedics rushed in, followed by a police officer. A tall, tired-looking man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Officer Donnelly. He'd been on the force for 15 years, Margaret would learn later, and he'd seen plenty. But even he stopped dead when he saw Ellie. "Goodness," he muttered under his breath. The whispers had already started. Margaret could hear them echoing through the hallway, growing louder, more worried with each retelling. "A 6-year-old gave birth? That's impossible. How could we not have known? Where are her parents?" Officer Donnelly knelt down beside Margaret, his voice gentle but firm. "Ellie, I'm Officer Donnelly. I need you to let the paramedics check on the baby, okay? We need to make sure he's healthy." Ellie shook her head violently, pressing the baby tighter against her small chest. "He's mine to watch," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She told me to watch him. She said she'd come back, but she didn't, and I didn't know what to do, and I was scared, and—" "Who told you, honey?" Margaret interrupted gently. "Who gave you this baby?" But before Ellie could answer, the paramedics gently but firmly took the infant from her arms. The little girl let out a cry that would haunt Margaret's dreams for weeks. A sound of pure, helpless despair. Officer Donnelly helped Ellie to her feet while Margaret stood, her heart breaking into pieces. Social services was already on their way. The hospital was preparing. And somewhere in the chaos, someone said the words that made Margaret's heart freeze. "We need to examine her. We need to know if she's the mother." Margaret looked at Ellie, really looked at her. This tiny, fragile child who probably weighed 60 pounds soaking wet. This little girl who still had baby teeth. And Margaret knew, deep in her bones, that something was terribly, impossibly wrong with this whole picture. 2 hours later at County General Hospital, a doctor emerged from the examination room with a clipboard and an expression of complete bewilderment. "That child did not give birth," he announced to the room. "Physically, medically, biologically, it's impossible. She's never been pregnant." The question hung in the air like smoke, suffocating everyone in the waiting room. If Ellie didn't give birth to that baby, then where did he come from? The hospital waiting room felt colder than it should have been. Margaret sat beside Officer Donnelly, both of them staring at the examination room door where Ellie had disappeared with doctors and a social worker named Corinne Vasquez. The baby, they still didn't have a name for him, was 3 floors up in the neonatal unit. Underweight, the doctors said, but otherwise healthy. Someone had been feeding him, caring for him, keeping him alive. But who? 15 years on the job, Donnelly muttered, running his hand through his graying hair. Never seen anything like this. Margaret nodded, her mind spinning with questions that had no answers. She'd been volunteering at Riverside Elementary for 3 years, ever since her husband passed and the silence in her house became too loud to bear. She'd seen troubled children before, quiet children, scared children, but Ellie was different. Ellie had been carrying a secret so heavy it should have crushed her. The examination room door finally opened. Corinne Vasquez stepped out, her expression tight with frustration. She was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much too soon in her career with Child Protective Services. "She won't talk," Corinne said quietly, glancing back at the closed door. "Every time I ask about the baby, she just shuts down completely. Starts humming that same lullaby over and over." "Let me try," Margaret heard herself say. Donnelly looked at her skeptically. "Ma'am, you're not family and you're not authorized." "That child trusts me," Margaret interrupted more firmly than she'd spoken in years. "I'm the one who found her. I stayed with her. Let me try." Corinne studied Margaret for a long moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. That's all I can give you." The examination room was small and sterile, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. Ellie sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her legs dangling, too short to reach the floor. She was wearing a hospital gown now, her school clothes bagged as evidence. She looked even smaller than before. "Hey there, sweetheart," Margaret said softly, pulling up a chair. "Remember me? Miss Margaret from school?" Ellie's eyes flickered toward her, then away. But she wasn't humming anymore. That was something. "You must be so tired," Margaret continued, keeping her voice gentle and low. "And scared. I bet you've been scared for a long time, haven't you?" A tiny nod. Progress. "The baby's okay," Margaret said. "The doctors are taking good care of him. He's warm and safe and fed. You did a good job protecting him, Ellie. You were very brave." Ellie's lower lip trembled. "I didn't know what else to do. She said she was coming back. She promised." Margaret's heart clenched. "Who promised, honey? Who gave you that baby?" Ellie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The lady. The sad lady who was staying with us." "At your house?" Another nod. "What was her name?" I don't know. She never said. Miss Shanice just called her girl or the visitor. She stayed in the basement room." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. "How long was she there?" "I don't know. A while. She had a big belly and she was always crying. Always crying at night." Ellie's small hands twisted together. "Then one morning she wasn't there anymore, but the baby was. In a basket by my bed. And there was a note." "What did the note say?" "I can't read good yet," Ellie admitted, her voice cracking. "But there were words, and she left some bottles and diapers. I tried to take care of him like she showed me. I tried so hard. But I got scared. He kept crying and I didn't have enough milk for the bottles anymore. And I didn't know who to tell. Because Miss Shanice said I couldn't tell nobody about the visitor and..." The door burst open. Corinne rushed in, followed by Donnelly. And behind them stood a woman Margaret had never seen before. She was in her early 40s, heavy set, wearing a cheap jacket and carrying a knockoff designer purse. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her expression was a mixture of anger and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "What are you doing to my daughter?" the woman demanded, her voice sharp and loud in the small room. Ellie went rigid, her face draining of all color. "Mrs. Renford, I presume?" Corinne said calmly, though Margaret noticed her hand move to her phone. "That's right, Shanice Renford. And I want to know why my baby girl is being held here like some kind of criminal." "We're just trying to understand," Donnelly began. "Understand what?" "That some crazy story got blown out of proportion? Ellie's a good girl. She don't cause no trouble. Now where's the paperwork so I can take her home? Margaret watched Ellie's face carefully. The child had gone completely still, barely breathing, her eyes locked on the floor. This wasn't the reaction of a child seeing her mother. This was the reaction of someone terrified. Corinne pulled out her tablet, scrolling through documents. Mrs. Renford, I'm going to need to see some identification. And Ellie's birth certificate if you have it. For just a fraction of a second, Shanice Renford hesitated. It was barely noticeable, but Margaret saw it. Donnelly saw it too. His eyes narrowed slightly. I got her informally, Shanice said, recovering quickly. From my cousin who passed a few years back. Couldn't have children of her own, you know how it is. The girl needed a home, I gave her one. And you have documentation of this informal arrangement? Corinne pressed. Another hesitation. Longer this time. It's at home. In my files, I'll bring it tomorrow. Officer Donnelly stepped forward. Ma'am, your daughter was found with a newborn infant. We need to establish she's 6 years old. Shanice's voice rose. You really think a 6-year-old had a baby? You people are confused. Margaret stood slowly. Something was very, very wrong. And as she looked between Shanice Renford's 2 quick answers and Ellie's frozen, terrified face, one thing became crystal clear. This woman was not telling the truth. And whatever the truth was, it was buried deep. 3 days later, Margaret found herself doing something she never imagined she would do. Breaking the rules. Officer Donnelly had called her that morning. I'm doing a welfare check on the Renford residence, he'd said, his voice careful. Officially, you shouldn't be there. Unofficially, I could use someone who knows how to talk to scared children. Now they stood on the sagging porch of 447 Maple Street, a house that looked like it was slowly giving up. The paint was peeling, the gutters hung at odd angles, and the front yard was more dirt than grass. But what struck Margaret most was the silence. No children's laughter, no sounds of play. Just an eerie quiet that made her skin crawl. Donnelly knocked firmly. Mrs. Renford? Police. Welfare check. The door opened just a crack, a chain lock still in place. Shanice's eye appeared in the gap, suspicious and hard. You got a warrant? Don't need one for a welfare check, ma'am. We have concerns about the living conditions for the children in your care. You can let us in voluntarily, or I can come back with a court order. Your choice. The eye disappeared. There was a long pause, the sound of shuffling, then whispered voices. Finally, the chain rattled and the door swung open. The smell hit Margaret first, not terrible but stale. Like too many people living in too small a space with not enough fresh air. The living room was cluttered with mismatched furniture, piles of laundry, and toys scattered across a stained carpet. But it was the children that made Margaret's heart sink. 4 of them, ranging from maybe 2 years old to about 7. They sat in a row on the couch, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Too still, too silent. Children that age should be fidgeting, talking, moving. These kids looked like little statues. These are all your children? Donnelly asked, pulling out his notepad. Family, Shanice said quickly. I help out with family kids. Their mama's work, can't always be around. You know how it is. Margaret's eyes swept the room. In the corner, she spotted a small figure washing dishes at a sink filled with soapy water. The child's back was turned, but Margaret recognized the thin shoulders, the dark hair. Ellie? Margaret called softly. The little girl turned and Margaret had to stop herself from gasping. Ellie looked even thinner than she had at the hospital, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were red and raw from the dish soap. She likes to help out, Shanice said, moving to block Margaret's path. Keeps her busy, gives her purpose. She's 6 years old, Donnelly said, his voice tight. Where's she sleeping? Got a room upstairs. Shares with the younger ones. They like being together. While Donnelly asked more questions, Margaret slowly made her way toward the back of the house. The kitchen was cramped, dishes piled high, a refrigerator covered in past due notices and reminder cards. Through a doorway, she could see stairs leading down to what must be a basement, and in the corner of the kitchen, hanging on a hook, was a jacket. A teenager's jacket, denim, decorated with patches and pins. far too big for any of the children she'd seen. Mrs. Renford, Donnelly was saying, I'm going to need to see documentation for each of these children. Birth certificates, custody agreements, something official. It's all informal. Nothing about child care is informal anymore, ma'am. Not in this state. If you're caring for children who aren't legally yours, there are procedures, registrations, home inspections. Shanice's face hardened. You targeting me because I'm trying to help family? Because I'm not rich? Because I'm targeting you because a 6-year-old girl showed up at school with a newborn baby, and nobody knows where that baby came from, Donnelly interrupted, his patience clearly wearing thin. And that 6-year-old lives here. So yes, ma'am, I have questions. Margaret slipped past them, moving toward the basement door. She could hear Shanice's voice rising, arguing with Donnelly, but she had to see, had to know. The basement stairs creaked as she descended. It was darker down here, cooler. There were 2 small rooms, one filled with boxes and old furniture, the other had a mattress on the floor, blankets tangled in a heap, and on a makeshift shelf, baby bottles. Empty now, but recently used. Margaret's hands trembled as she looked around. Someone had been living down here, recently. Ma'am, you can't be down there! Shanice's voice shrieked from the top of the stairs. Margaret climbed back up quickly, her mind racing. Donnelly gave her a look that said they'd talk later. As they were leaving, escorted firmly to the door by an increasingly agitated Shanice, Margaret noticed movement at the window next door. An elderly woman, watching. When their eyes met, the neighbor made a small gesture. Wait. Margaret nodded slightly. They were halfway to Donnelly's patrol car when the neighbor's door opened. The woman moved quickly for her age, pressing something into Margaret's hand. 3 weeks ago, the old woman whispered urgently, glancing back at the Renford house. There was a girl, young, maybe 15, 16, pregnant, very pregnant. I used to see her in the window sometimes looking out, looking so sad. What happened to her? Margaret breathed. That's just it, the neighbor said, her eyes wide with worry. One day she was there, the next day gone, vanished. I asked Shanice about her, casual-like over the fence. She said the girl went back to her mama. But what? Nobody came to pick her up, no car, no taxi, nothing. She was there one day, gone the next, and nobody asked questions. Nobody looked for her. The woman pressed the paper more firmly into Margaret's palm. My phone number. Call me if you need anything. Somebody needs to find that girl. Margaret looked down at the folded note in her hand as Donnelly started the car. Through the review mirror, she could see Shanice Renford standing in her doorway, watching them leave. And in the upstairs window, a small face appeared for just a moment. Ellie. The little girl pressed her hand against the glass, and even from this distance Margaret could see the message written on her palm in what looked like marker. Help. Margaret couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ellie's small hand pressed against that window, the desperate plea written across her palm. At 6 in the morning, her phone rang. It was Donnelly. Meet me at Rosie's Diner on 5th Street. 1 hour. And bring your friend from the church, the one who used to work at the library. Dorothy Fletcher arrived at the diner wearing her reading glasses on a chain and carrying a laptop that looked older than some of Margaret's grandchildren would have been. She'd been the head librarian at County Central for 30 years before retiring. And if there was one thing Dorothy knew how to do, it was research. You're going to tell me this is legal, right? Dorothy asked as she slid into the booth beside Margaret. Donnelly set down 3 cups of coffee. Public records are public, ma'am. Anybody can look them up. I'm just suggesting what to look for. For the next 2 hours, they dug. Dorothy's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up records from county databases, court filings, social services registrations. What they found made Margaret's heart sink. She's in 3 counties, Dorothy said, turning the screen so they could all see. Shanice Renford has addresses registered in Pierce County, that's here, but also in Millbrook County and Riverside County, all within the last 5 years. How is that possible? Margaret asked. It's not illegal, Donnelly said grimly. Technically, people move. People have family in different places. But look at this. He pointed to another document Dorothy had pulled up. In each county, she's registered as a foster caregiver. Informal, unlicensed, but receiving state assistance for children in her care. Dorothy clicked through more files. Here's Pierce County 3 years ago. 2 children ages 4 and 6, listed as temporary family placement. Then, she scrolled down. 6 months later, case closed. Children returned to biological family. No follow-up. And Millbrook? Margaret leaned in closer. Same pattern. 2 children, different ages. Stayed with Shanice for about 8 months. Then suddenly case closed. No details. They went through 7 cases total. 7 different children, 7 different times, all following the same pattern. Children appeared in Shanice's care, stayed for months, then vanished from the records with minimal documentation. Where are these kids now? Margaret whispered. Donnelly's jaw tightened. That's the question, isn't it? Some might be legitimately back with family, but some... He trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. Dorothy pulled up another screen. There's something else. Look at the benefits claims. She's been receiving assistance for these children, but the amounts don't always match up with the number of kids in the reports. She's claiming money for children who aren't documented, Donnelly said. Maybe children who aren't even... His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. What? Margaret asked. Records just sent me something. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled up an email. I asked them to verify Ellie Renford's birth certificate, the one on file with the school. He opened an attachment, a copy of a birth certificate. Ellie Marie Renford, born June 14, 2018, in Riverside County. Okay, Margaret said slowly. So? Donnelly opened a second attachment. This is a certificate, same name. Ellie Marie Renford, passed away August 3, 2018, 2 months old. Sudden infant loss. The diner seemed to tilt around Margaret. That's impossible. The birth certificate Shanice used to enroll Ellie in school belongs to a baby who passed away 6 years ago, Donnelly said quietly. Which means the little girl we know isn't Ellie Renford, she's someone else entirely. And Shanice is using a lost child's identity. Dorothy's hands had stopped typing. Dear Lord, who is she then? Where did she come from? I don't know, Donnelly admitted. But I'm going to find out. Margaret felt sick. This is bigger than we thought. This isn't just about one baby, one scared little girl. This is a system, Dorothy finished. She's been doing this for years, taking children, moving them between counties using identities that can't be easily traced. Donnelly stood abruptly. I need to take this to my captain. This is beyond a welfare check now. This is fraud, identity theft, possibly illegal transfer. Will they listen? Margaret asked. Will they act fast enough? The officer's expression was grim. I'll make them listen, but in the meantime, you two keep digging. Find out everything you can about those other children, where they came from, where they went. We need a pattern we can prove. As Donnelly left, Margaret stared at the screen showing the certificate of the real Ellie Renford, a baby who'd lived just 8 weeks. A baby whose name had been stolen and given to another child. A child whose real name they didn't even know. Margaret, Dorothy said softly, pulling up yet another document. You need to see this. It was a news article from Millbrook County dated 18 months ago. The headline read, Local Woman Seeks Missing Daughter. The photograph showed a tired-looking woman, maybe mid-30s, holding a picture of a little girl with dark hair and sad eyes. A little girl who looked exactly like Ellie. Her real name is Isabel Moreno, Dorothy read aloud. She was 4 years old when she disappeared from a park in Millbrook. The mother, Rosa Moreno, said she looked away for just a moment and Isabel was gone. Police suspected the mother, investigated her for months, but never filed charges. The case went cold. Margaret's hands shook as she looked at the photograph. That's her. That's our Ellie. The article says Rosa Moreno still puts up flyers every year. Still searches, still hopes. Dorothy looked up, tears in her eyes. She's been looking for her daughter for 2 years, Margaret. and nobody connected it because the child is living under a completely different name in a different county. Margaret pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. "We need to call her. We need to tell her." "Wait," Dorothy cautioned. "We need to be sure. We need proof. If we get this wrong, if we give this woman false hope, and if we wait too long," Margaret's voice cracked, "how many more days does that little girl have to live in that house, being called by a lost child's name, not even knowing her own mother is looking for her?" Before Dorothy could answer, Margaret's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, just 4 words. "She knows you know." And then, 5 seconds later, another message. This one was a photo. Showed Ellie, or Isabel, sitting at a kitchen table. She was looking directly at the camera, and standing behind her, hand on the child's shoulder, was Shanice Renford. The message was clear. Back off, or the girl pays the price. Margaret made her decision in the parking lot of Rosie's Diner, and it was the wrong one. She knew it was wrong even as she started her car. Dorothy was calling after her, warning her to wait for Donnelly, to let the police handle it. But all Margaret could see was that photograph, Shanice's hand on Ellie's shoulder, that threatening message. Someone had to do something. Now. The drive to 447 Maple Street took 12 minutes. 12 minutes for Margaret to rehearse what she'd say, to imagine confronting Shanice with the evidence about the stolen identity, about the other missing children. 12 minutes to convince herself she was doing the right thing. She wasn't. Shanice answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Margaret, didn't expect to see you again so soon." "We need to talk," Margaret said, trying to keep her voice steady. "About Ellie, about who she really is." The smile vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about. Her name isn't Ellie Renford. That baby passed away 6 years ago. The little girl in your house is Isabel Moreno, and her mother has been searching for her for 2 years. It happened faster than Margaret expected. Shanice's expression shifted from surprise to calculation to cold fury in the span of a heartbeat. "You got proof of that?" Shanice asked quietly. Too quietly. "I have a certificate. I have news articles. I have—" "You got nothing," Shanice interrupted. "You got suspicions from a bitter old woman who can't mind her own business. You think the police gonna listen to you? You think they gonna tear apart a home based on some internet searches?" Margaret's confidence faltered. "Her mother deserves to know." "Her mother?" Shanice laughed, harsh and sharp. "You mean the woman who lost her kid in a park? The woman who was so busy on her phone she didn't notice her daughter wandering off? Yeah, real mother of the year there. That doesn't give you the right—" "I saved that girl." Shanice's voice rose. "I gave her a home when nobody else wanted her. I feed her, clothe her, keep a roof over her head. What do? You volunteer a few hours a week and think you're some kind of hero." Margaret stood her ground, though her hands were shaking. "I know about the other children, the ones in Millbrook County, in Riverside County. I know you've been moving children around, using fake identities, collecting benefits. Get off my property. I'm going to the police." "No, you're not." Shanice pulled out her phone. "You're harassing me. You came to my home, making wild accusations without proof. You're targeting me because of how I look, because of where I live. I got witnesses who'll say you've been stalking my family." "That's not true." But Shanice was already dialing. "Yeah, police? I need to report a woman who's been harassing me and my children. Showed up at my house making threats." Margaret realized her mistake too late. She had no authority here, no legal standing. Just accusations she couldn't prove and a woman who knew exactly how to turn the situation around. By the time Officer Donnelly arrived, called by his own dispatcher about the complaint, the damage was done. "Margaret, what were you thinking?" he asked quietly, pulling her aside while another officer took Shanice's statement. "I thought—" "You didn't think. You came here alone, confronted a suspect, and now she's got grounds for a restraining order." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I can't protect you from this. I can't protect Ellie from this." The restraining order came through in 48 hours. Margaret was legally forbidden from coming within 500 feet of Shanice Renford or any of the children in her care. including Ellie. And then came the worst news. She withdrew Ellie from school, Dorothy reported over the phone, her voice heavy with defeat. Filed paperwork saying she's homeschooling now, which means nobody from outside can check on that child. Nobody can see her. Margaret sat in her kitchen, the restraining order papers spread in front of her, and felt like she'd failed. She'd tried to help and made everything worse. Ellie was more isolated than ever, and Margaret was powerless to do anything about it. Donnelly called that evening. "My captain says we don't have enough for a warrant, not yet. Shanice hasn't technically broken any laws we can prove. The identity thing is suspicious, but she could claim she didn't know, that she was given wrong papers. Without testimony from the kids, without physical evidence of harm. So we just wait?" Margaret's voice cracked. "We just let her keep those children? I'm working on it. Dorothy's working on it. We're building a case, but Margaret, you need to step back. If you violate that restraining order, you'll end up in jail and Ellie will have nobody." That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering where she'd gone so wrong. Wondering if Ellie thought she'd abandoned her. At 11:47 p.m., her landline rang. Margaret fumbled for the phone in the dark. "Hello?" Silence, but not empty silence. There was breathing, and in the background, very faint, the sound of a child crying. "Hello," Margaret said again, her heart pounding. "Who is this?" The crying continued for another few seconds. Then, a small sound, like someone covering the receiver with their hand. And then the line went dead. Margaret stared at the phone, her hands trembling. She hit *69 for the callback number. "The last call received was from a payphone," the automated voice told her. "350147. Margaret grabbed her laptop, fingers shaking as she searched the number. The location came up immediately. A payphone on the corner of 5th and Maple Street, 3 blocks from Shanice Renford's house. Someone was asking for help, and Margaret knew exactly who. Margaret called Donnelly at midnight. She reached out. "Someone from that house called me." "How do you know it was from the house?" "The payphone is 3 blocks away, and I heard a child crying in the background, Donnelly. A child too scared to speak." There was a long pause. "Okay, we changed tactics. We stopped going after Shanice directly and start looking for the missing girl, the pregnant teenager the neighbor mentioned. If we can find her, she's our witness. She can tell us what's really happening in that house." The next morning, Margaret and Donnelly sat across from the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, in her small living room filled with photographs of grandchildren. "Tell me everything you remember about the girl," Donnelly said gently, notepad ready. Mrs. Chen closed her eyes, concentrating. "Young, maybe 15, 16, dark hair, always in a ponytail. She looked tired all the time. Sad. So sad. I'd see her in the window sometimes, just staring out at the street like she was waiting for someone." "Did she ever come outside?" "Once or twice to take out trash, but Shanice was always watching, always right there." Donnelly pulled out his phone, scrolling through files. "I'm going to show you some pictures. Tell me if any of these girls look familiar." He showed her photographs of missing teenagers from the Tri-County area. Mrs. Chen shook her head at each one until, "Her," she said, pointing at the screen. "That's her. I'm sure of it." Donnelly's expression darkened. "Iris Caldwell, age 16, reported as a runaway by her mother 8 months ago. Last seen in Millbrook County." "Does it say where her mother lives?" Margaret asked. "Address is listed." Donnelly stood. "Let's go." Kendra Wright lived in a rundown apartment complex on the east side of Millbrook, 40 minutes away. She answered the door in a bathrobe, her hair uncombed, her eyes hollow. The apartment smelled like stale smoke and regret. "Ms. Wright, I'm Officer Donnelly. This is Margaret Hollins. We're here about your daughter, Iris." Kendra's face crumpled. "Did you find her? Is she—" She couldn't finish the question. "We don't know where she is," Donnelly said carefully, "but we think she may have been staying at a house in our county. A woman named Shanice Renford. Does that name mean anything to you?" Kendra swayed slightly, gripping the doorframe. "Shanice. Oh, Lord." You know her? Come in, Kendra whispered. You need to sit down for this. The living room was sparse. A couch, a coffee table covered in clutter and empty bottles. Kendra sat, her hands shaking. I've been in recovery for 6 months, she said, as if that explained everything. Before that I wasn't. I lost custody of Iris when she was 9. Foster care took her. I tried to get her back, but I kept struggling, kept failing. By the time I got better, she was already running, angry at the world, angry at me. What does this have to do with Shanice? Margaret asked gently. Kendra looked up, tears streaming down her face. Shanice wasn't the first time I met her. It was years ago, when I was at my worst. I had another baby, before Iris. Margaret's heart stopped. A little girl, 3 months old. Beautiful, perfect. And I couldn't take care of her. Couldn't even keep myself together, let alone a baby. Kendra's voice broke. A woman approached me outside a center, said she helped mothers in trouble. Said she knew someone who could give my baby a good home, someone who'd take care of her. Shanice, Donnelly said. Kendra nodded. She gave me $500, cash. Took my baby girl and said she'd make sure she got adopted by a nice family. I was so lost, so desperate I believed her. I signed some papers I didn't read, and then she was gone. When was this? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. 7 years ago. My baby would be 7 now. I don't even know her name. I never got to name her. Donnelly leaned forward. Did Shanice tell you anything about where the baby would go? Did you ever try to find her? I tried when I got better the first time, but Shanice's phone number didn't work anymore. The address she gave me was fake. It was like she never existed. Kendra wiped her eyes. And then Iris ran away 8 months ago. She called me once, said she was staying with someone who was helping her. Said she was pregnant and scared and needed time to think. I begged her to come home, but she wouldn't. That was the last time I heard from her. Do you think, Margaret asked carefully, that Iris might have ended up with Shanice too? I don't know. Maybe. If she was desperate enough, if she found out somehow. Kendra looked up suddenly. Why are you asking about Shanice? Did she do something? Do you know where my daughters are? Donnelly exchanged a glance with Margaret. Ms. Right. We believe your older daughter Iris was staying at Shanice's house. And we believe your younger daughter might still be there. The color drained from Kendra's face. There's a little girl living with Shanice, Margaret said softly. About 6 years old, dark hair, quiet, scared. She's being called Ellie, but that's not her real name. Kendra's hands flew to her mouth. Oh my goodness, that's her. That's my baby. We don't know for certain. I know, Kendra interrupted, standing suddenly. I know it in my bones. Shanice didn't adopt my baby out. She kept her. She's been keeping her this whole time. Her voice rose, frantic now. And Iris found her. That's why she was there. She found out about her little sister and went to get her and… She broke off, sobbing. Donnelly stood, his expression grim. Ms. Wright, I need you to make an official statement. Everything you just told us. We need it documented. And then what? Then you get my daughters back? Margaret thought of the restraining order, of the locked house, of Ellie's face in the window. Then, Donnelly said, his voice hard with determination, we bring Shanice Renford down. Kendra Wright's testimony should have been enough. It wasn't. She's an unreliable witness, Donnelly's captain said, tossing the file back across the desk. Former struggles, history of poor decisions, gave away her own child. Defense will tear her apart. We need more. Donnelly slammed his hand on the desk. She's telling the truth. Maybe, but maybe doesn't get us a warrant to raid a house and remove children. Bring me hard evidence, officer, not stories. Margaret watched Donnelly storm out of the police station, frustration written all over his face. She understood. They had pieces of a puzzle, but no way to put them together legally. Dorothy called that afternoon with news that made Margaret's heart sink. I found records of the other children, Dorothy said, her voice shaking. The ones who went through Shanice's care over the years. I tracked down families, made calls, pretended to be doing a study on foster systems. And, of the 8 children, 6 were eventually reunited with families or moved to official foster care. But 2, Dorothy paused. 2 just vanished. A boy named Marcus, age 4, and a girl named Sophie, age 5. Both were in Shanice's care in different counties. Both disappeared from records completely. No adoption papers, no family reunification, nothing. It's like they never existed. Margaret felt sick. Where are they, Dorothy? I don't know. And that's what terrifies me. Donnelly made one more attempt, meeting with his captain and showing him everything. Kendra's testimony, the missing children, the fake identity. The captain listened, then shook his head. It's circumstantial, all of it. Yes, it looks suspicious. Yes, I agree something's wrong. But without physical evidence, without testimony from the children themselves, without concrete proof of a crime happening right now, I can't authorize a raid. So we just wait for another child to disappear? Donnelly's voice was tight with anger. We build a proper case. We do this by the book. But Donnelly was running out of time. Margaret was running out of hope. And somewhere in that house on Maple Street, Ellie was running out of chances. That night at 9:37 p.m., Margaret's phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Heavy breathing. Then a whisper so quiet Margaret had to press the phone hard against her ear. Miss Margaret? Her heart nearly stopped. Ellie? Please help us. The little girl's voice was shaking. Please, there's more. In the basement. She locks us down there when people come. There's 2 boys and they're so little and they cry all the time and I try to help them, but I can't and… Ellie, honey, where are you calling from? The payphone. I snuck out the back. But I have to go back before she notices. Please, Miss Margaret, please come get us. I will, sweetheart. I promise. Stay safe. Can you… The line went dead. Margaret's hands shook as she immediately called Donnelly. She called. Ellie called. There are more children in that house, locked in the basement. We have to… I'm on my way to you, Donnelly interrupted. Don't move. This is it, Margaret. This is the emergency situation we needed. A child in immediate danger calling for help. That's grounds for a welfare check without a warrant. Margaret looked out her window into the dark night. Somewhere out there, Ellie was sneaking back into that house of shadows. Back into the basement. Back into the darkness. But not for long. Bring backup, Margaret said. Bring everyone you can. We're getting those children out tonight. Officer Donnelly arrived at Shanice Renford's house at 10:42 p.m. with 3 patrol cars and 2 Child Protective Services workers. Margaret waited in Donnelly's car, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Police, we have reason to believe children are in immediate danger. Open the door. Nothing. The house was dark except for a single light in an upstairs window. Donnelly knocked again, louder. Mrs. Renford, this is the police. We're coming in. Finally, movement. The porch light flickered on. Shanice appeared wearing a nightgown, her face a mask of confusion and anger. What is this? It's almost 11 o'clock. I got children sleeping. Where are they? Donnelly demanded. We received a call from this residence. A child reporting distress. That's impossible. All my kids are in bed. Then you won't mind if we check. Shanice's expression shifted. For just a moment, Margaret saw it. Panic. Raw, genuine panic. Then it was gone, replaced by indignation. You got a warrant? We have a credible report of children in immediate danger. Stand aside, ma'am. 2 officers moved past her into the house. Margaret watched from the car as lights began turning on throughout the home. She could hear voices, movement, the sound of doors opening. Then from inside the house, a shout. We need cutters. There's a padlock on the basement door. Margaret's hands flew to her mouth. Donnelly disappeared into the house. For 3 agonizing minutes, Margaret heard nothing but muffled sounds. Then, finally, a police radio crackled. We've got 3 minors. Repeat, 3 minors found in basement, requesting immediate medical assistance. Margaret couldn't stay in the car anymore. She rushed to the porch just as an officer was bringing out a small boy, maybe 3 years old, wrapped in a blanket. The child was messy, trembling, blinking in the sudden brightness of the porch lights. Behind him came another officer carrying an even younger boy, barely 2, who was crying softly, his face buried in the officer's shoulder. And then came Ellie. She walked out on her own, holding the hand of a social worker, her face pale but her chin lifted with something like defiance. When she saw Margaret, her composure broke. She pulled away from the social worker and ran. Margaret caught her, dropping to her knees and wrapping the little girl in her arms. "You came," Ellie sobbed into Margaret's shoulder. "You came. I'll always come," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Always." Inside, Shanice was being handcuffed. Her voice rose sharp and furious. "This is illegal. You had no right. I want my lawyer. Those children are in my legal care." "Save it for the judge," Donnelly said coldly. "You're under arrest for child endangerment, fraud, and operating an unlicensed child care facility." But as they led Shanice to the patrol car, Donnelly pulled Margaret aside. His face was grim. "The baby. The newborn that Ellie was found with at the school. He's not here." Margaret's relief turned to ice. "What do you mean he's not here?" "Shanice claims she returned him to his mother, but she can't provide a name, address, or any documentation." Donnelly lowered his voice. "Margaret, we found something else. A cell phone hidden in the basement. Text messages between Shanice and at least 4 other women. They're transferring children, moving them between houses, between counties. Dear Lord. There's a message from 2 weeks ago. The teenager ran away with the baby. Can you get another one? Margaret, this is bigger than we thought. This is organized." Margaret looked at Ellie, now being checked by paramedics. "The teenager, Iris, Kendra's daughter. Where is she? That's what we need to find out." Donnelly's jaw tightened. "And we need to find her fast, because if Shanice is telling the truth about one thing, that baby is out there somewhere. And if she's lying..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Somewhere out there was a 16-year-old runaway and a newborn baby, lost in a system that had already failed them both. The clock was ticking. Shanice Renford sat in the interrogation room, silent. She'd lawyered up within an hour of her arrest, and now she wasn't saying a word. But her phone was talking for her. Donnelly spent the entire next day going through the messages with the tech team. What they found was horrifying. A network of women across 3 states moving children like packages, collecting benefits, avoiding oversight. "Here," the tech specialist said, pointing at the screen. 3 weeks ago, message to a number registered in Riverside County. Girl took the baby and ran, checked the shelters. Donnelly's pulse quickened. "Can you trace the response?" "Already did." The other person wrote back, "Checked St. Mary's and Hope House. No sign." "Turisi, those are runaway shelters," Donnelly said. "For teenagers." Margaret had brought Ellie home with her that morning, temporary emergency placement while the court sorted everything out. The little girl was quiet, exhausted, but safe. She sat at Margaret's kitchen table drawing pictures while Margaret made phone calls. "St. Mary's Shelter, how can I help you?" "My name is Margaret Hollins. I'm trying to locate a teenage girl who may have stayed with you recently. Iris Caldwell, 16 years old, pregnant." "I'm sorry, ma'am, we can't give out information about our residents." "Please, her mother is looking for her. Her little sister needs her. She could be in danger." A pause, then quietly, "Hold on." A different voice came on the line. "This is Sister Patricia, the director. You're asking about Iris?" Margaret's heart leaped. "Yes. Was she there?" "She was here. 2 weeks ago. She arrived in labor, terrified, wouldn't tell us her real name. We took her to County General Hospital. And?" Sister Patricia's voice dropped. "She had the baby, a healthy boy. But there were complications, serious ones. The doctors did everything they could, but..." Margaret felt the room spin. "Is she alive?" "She's at Mercy Hospital in Riverside, room 312. She's been asking for someone named Ellie. Keeps saying she needs to tell Ellie she's sorry." Donnelly was already grabbing his keys when Margaret called him. 30 minutes later, they stood outside room 312. Through the window, they could see a frail teenage girl connected to monitors, her face pale against white pillows. Kendra Wright sat beside the bed, holding her daughter's hand, tears streaming down her face. "She's stable," the nurse told them quietly. "But it was close. Another day and we might have lost her." Margaret knocked softly. Kendra looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "She wants to talk to the police," Kendra whispered. "She says she knows where the other children are." Iris Caldwell opened her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I tried to save my baby sister. I tried to save them all. But Shanice, she has friends, other houses, other women. They move the kids when they think someone's getting suspicious." "Where?" Donnelly asked gently. Iris's hand trembled as she pointed to a notebook on the bedside table. "I wrote down everything I could remember. Addresses, names. Please find them." Margaret picked up the notebook. Inside were scrawled addresses across 3 counties. Underneath, one sentence in shaky handwriting. "Tell Ellie I'm sorry I couldn't come back for her." Donnelly called for backup immediately. Iris's notebook contained 7 addresses, 7 houses where children might be hidden, just like Ellie had been. By dawn, officers were executing wellness checks across 3 counties. What they found shook the entire child protective system. 14 children, 14 kids ranging from ages 2 to 8, all living in similar situations. Different women, different houses, but the same pattern. Unlicensed care, falsified documents, state benefits collected under fake names. Margaret sat in the hospital cafeteria, exhausted, watching the news coverage on the television mounted in the corner. The story was everywhere now. Multi-county child welfare scandal uncovered. Her phone rang. Dorothy. "They found the baby," Dorothy said. "Iris's baby. He's been in state foster care for 2 weeks. When Iris gave birth at the hospital, she was unconscious from the strain. She couldn't give them any information, so they classified the baby as abandoned. He's been in the system this whole time, just 40 miles away." Margaret closed her eyes. All of this, because systems don't talk to each other. Because a scared teenager couldn't find help. "But she did find help," Dorothy said softly. "She found her little sister. She trusted Ellie to protect her baby when she couldn't, and Ellie did exactly that. She kept him safe until someone could help." Back in room 312, Iris was sitting up slightly, Kendra still holding her hand. Margaret entered quietly. "The police found everyone," Margaret told her gently. "All the children you wrote about, they're safe now." Iris's eyes filled with tears. "And my baby? My son? He's healthy. He's in foster care, waiting for you to get strong enough to make decisions about his future." "And Ellie?" Iris whispered. "Is she okay? I tried to come back for her. I tried so hard, but I got sick and I couldn't." "She's with me," Margaret said. "She's safe and she's been asking about you." Kendra looked up. "Can she visit? Can they see each other?" Margaret smiled. "I'll bring her tomorrow. Sisters should be together." That evening, Margaret sat down with Ellie in her living room. The little girl was curled up on the couch, finally looking like a child instead of someone carrying the weight of the world. "Ellie, I need to tell you something important. About Iris. About your big sister." Ellie looked up, hope and fear mixed in her eyes. "She's alive, sweetheart. She's in the hospital, but she's going to be okay. And she wants to see you." Ellie burst into tears. Not sad tears, but relief. "She came back? She really came back?" "She never stopped trying," Margaret said, pulling the child close. "And neither did your real mother. Her name is Kendra, and she's been looking for you for 7 years." The truth was finally out. The lies were finally over. Tomorrow, a family torn apart would begin to heal. The courthouse was packed. News cameras lined the hallway outside. This wasn't just about one woman and one child anymore. This was about exposing a system that had failed for years. Shanice Renford sat at the defense table, her lawyer whispering strategies. She looked different now, smaller, defeated, but still defiant. Margaret sat in the gallery, Ellie beside her, holding the little girl's hand tight. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Ms. Renford operated an illegal network trading children across 3 counties for financial gain. Phone records show coordination with at least 6 other individuals. 14 children were recovered from similar situations. Shanice's lawyer argued back. My client provided homes for children who had nowhere else to go. Yes, the paperwork was informal, but her intentions don't matter, the judge interrupted. The law exists to protect children, and Ms. Renford systematically violated it. Then Corinne Vasquez took the stand, describing the conditions of the house, the locked basement, the terrified children. Officer Donnelly presented the phone records, the fake identities, the trail of missing documentation. And then Kendra Wright walked to the witness stand. Her hands shook as she was sworn in, but her voice was steady. 7 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I gave my baby daughter to Shanice Renford for $500. I was told she'd find my daughter a good home. Instead, she kept her, used a lost child's identity to hide her. My daughter, Isabel, her real name is Isabel, has been living a lie her entire life. The courtroom was silent. I don't deserve her back, Kendra continued, tears streaming down her face. I know that. But Margaret Hollins does. She's the one who found her, who protected her, who loved her when I couldn't. The judge looked at Kendra. What are you asking for, Ms. Wright? I'm asking you to let Margaret adopt my daughter, legally, properly. So Isabel, so Ellie, can finally have the home she deserves. The judge turned to Shanice. Do you have anything to say in your defense? For the first time, Shanice's mask cracked. I gave those kids a roof. I fed them. You locked children in basements, the judge said coldly. You used fake names. You profited from their vulnerability. This court finds you guilty of child endangerment, fraud, and operating an illegal placement scheme. 15 years. The gavel struck. It was over. Margaret was granted immediate custody of Ellie. And in a final twist, the DNA test on Iris's baby confirmed what everyone already knew. He was Kendra's grandson. As they left the courthouse, Ellie looked up at Margaret. Can I still be called Ellie? I know my real name is Isabel, but you can be called whatever makes you happy, sweetheart, Margaret said. You get to choose now. That's what freedom means. Ellie thought for a moment. Ellie Margaret. Can that be my name? Margaret's heart swelled. That's perfect. 6 months later, Margaret's house looked different. The walls that once echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A backpack sat by the front door. A pair of small shoes rested on the welcome mat. Ellie Margaret Hollins, officially, legally adopted, bounded down the stairs wearing her school uniform, her hair in pigtails. Grandma, we're going to be late. Grandma. The word still made Margaret's heart soar every single time. At Riverside Elementary, Ellie was thriving. She'd made friends, joined the art club, and was slowly learning that childhood was supposed to be about playing, not surviving. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at loud noises. The therapist said it would take time, maybe years, but Ellie was healing. Every day, a little bit more. After dropping Ellie at school, Margaret drove to Mercy Hospital. Iris Caldwell sat in a wheelchair in the rehabilitation wing, stronger now, color back in her cheeks. Beside her sat Kendra, who'd been doing well for 8 months, and counting. How's my sister? Iris asked immediately. Growing like a weed, Margaret smiled. She drew you a picture, a rainbow with 2 girls holding hands. Iris's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the drawing. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm getting strong enough to visit soon. In the nursery down the hall, a social worker held Iris's baby, now 6 months old, chubby and healthy. Kendra had temporary guardianship while Iris recovered, but the plan was clear. When Iris was strong enough, she'd raise her son, with support, with help, with family. That afternoon, Margaret attended the first official meeting of the Guardian Angels program. 23 volunteers, mostly retired teachers, nurses, and social workers, filled the community center. Officer Donnelly stood at the front presenting the plan. We visit vulnerable homes. We build relationships. We watch for warning signs. We're not investigators. We're neighbors who care. Dorothy raised her hand. And if we see something wrong, you report it immediately. To me, to Child Protective Services, to whoever will listen. We're not going to let another child fall through the cracks, not on our watch. The room erupted in applause. Later that week, the two little boys rescued from Shanice's basement were adopted by loving families. Margaret attended both adoption hearings, watching as scared, silent children found their forever homes. The network that Shanice had built was dismantled completely. 6 other women were arrested. 21 children were placed in proper care. The system was changing, slowly, because people like Margaret refused to look away. That evening, as the sun set over her backyard, Margaret and Ellie knelt in the garden planting flowers. Tulips, daisies, and sunflowers. "Why do we plant them if they're just going to sleep all winter?" Ellie asked, patting dirt around a bulb. "Because come spring they'll bloom," Margaret said. "Even after the cold, even after the darkness, they come back, beautiful and strong." Ellie was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "Like me." Margaret pulled her close. "Exactly like you, sweetheart." As they worked, Ellie suddenly stopped. "Grandma, do you think Iris will teach me how to take care of her baby when she's better? I want to do it right this time, not be scared." "She will. And you know what? You already did everything right. You protected him when he needed you most. You were so brave." Ellie smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Inside the house, Margaret's phone buzzed with a text from Donnelly. "Just got word. 2 more kids reunited with families thanks to guardian angels. This is working." Margaret looked at Ellie, covered in dirt and grinning, and thought about how close they'd come to losing her. How many others were still out there, still waiting, still hoping. But not alone. Never alone again. The story of one little girl had sparked a movement. And while the system wasn't perfect, while there was still so much work to do, tonight, in this garden, there was hope. There was healing. There was home.